Jonathan K. says, having just seen Brexit, the movie, via YouTube, I'm wondering if you have any thoughts on the referendum. Why did it work mostly so well for the United States of America, but not so well for the United States of Europe? People were saying Brexit earlier. Let me just check and see if that vote has already happened. People were making comments like it had happened. I just want to see real quick. So I don't even know when the vote is. It may not even be today. It's still probably coming up. The vote is today. Okay. I don't know what. I don't know how it's going to go. I've heard that the Brexit is going to happen. But to answer your question, first of all, I think that they need to get the hell out of there. And I think that the reason that this Brexit is getting so much play now, when they vote on it several times, they've certainly voted on it before, they decided to stay, I think, by a pretty wide margin. What's different now is not the economic situation's turned, although that's part of it. What's happened now is that British people are waking up to realize that they don't live in their country anymore, that they're not allowed to walk down the streets of their own country anymore, that these people that out of mercy and kindness and generosity they invited to come and live in their country as refugees and as immigrants now roam down the streets and smash the windows of pubs because they're selling ham in there or bacon. This is not gratitude, and this is not civility. And I think the British people and the other people in Europe understand this very clearly. And they also understand that it's these protected elites that are in the European Union who are the farthest away from the reality of their policies. Angela Merkel and all the rest are as far removed from the effects of their policies as possible to be. And I think the British have had enough of it, and they want to get out. I think they want to get out to protect themselves against this immigration thing. I don't blame them one bit. Every time you remove yourself from the source of power, up or down a level, it's a disaster for you. It's a catastrophe. So I hope they leave. I'm a huge Anglophile. My mom's British, and half my family's British, and my dad's father was British. So, it's a lot of British there. But I think they need to get the hell out of there. But much more interesting is the actual question, not whether I think they should leave, but the actual question. Why did it work for the United States of America but not for the United States of Europe? It worked because the United States of America is essentially one culture, and the United States of Europe is 27 of them or whatever. When the reason I can say the United States of America is a single culture and Europe isn't is because of the melting pot. It's not because of the salad bowl, and it's not because of diversity, and it's not because of multiculturalism. That's what's destroying America. That's what's making us fail the same way that Europe has failed. The idea that you would come here, become a new person, give up your old identity, give up your old prejudices. You still bring the prejudices, you just don't get to act on them anymore. If you're a Hindu and you set up shop next to a Muslim, you guys don't get to kill each other anymore. You're just going to have to live with each other as Americans. That's all there is to it. And this melting pot idea succeeded because it made one culture out of this entire nation. The culture changed. If you add 20% Italians to this mix, you're going to have a different culture than you had otherwise. But it was still a monoculture. You were still an American. The thing that makes conservatives talk about how concerned we are about this Muslim immigration and how concerned we are about illegal Mexican immigration. And the reason we talk about these things, the emotional reason, is because both the Muslims and not all, but many of the Mexicans who are here illegally have no interest in becoming Americans. They're not here to become Americans. Some of them are here to destroy America. If these people came here and wanted to live here and renounced all their ties to their previous allegiance, we would have no emotional problem with them whatsoever. And I don't think we'd have a physical problem with them either. These are the first immigrants in the history of this country who feel this way. They don't want to be Americans. The Cubans were actually kind of a halfway house. I was in South Florida in the 70s, and there were a number of Cubans in Florida when I was a kid who you could tell were not Americans and didn't want to be. They were just hanging out here watching the clock, trying to run out the clock on Fidel so they could go back home. Because they were refugees and not immigrants. And this is the difference between a refugee and an immigrant. A refugee is running away from something, an immigrant is running to something, and it's a big difference. So, we are one culture, and as so many things, so many other things in this country, it really does come down to the Civil War, which really wasn't, obviously, it's not the revolution that got us our independence. It's not the Constitution that gave us our vision. And I know there's a lot of people here who thought the federal government overreached in the Civil War, and we make a good case that it did. What the Civil War did do, though, is it did make this a country. Shelby Foote was the guy who covered this beautifully, I thought. He basically said, prior to the Civil War, people would say the United States are prepared to make a treaty with France, plural. Afterwards, we would say the United States is prepared, because it's one nation, it's one country, it's one culture, it's one identity. And the reason, according to Shelby Foote, and I think he's absolutely right, is that we had a nation after the Civil War and only a union before the Civil War, was because he said that the kids who grow up in Tennessee, let's say, never been 20 miles away from their houses, next thing you know, they're walking through the fields of Pennsylvania, and Shelby Foote said they would leave brothers there and arms there and legs there. They'd seen the country, they'd seen the people. And you look at some of these battles where so many of the Confederate and Union forces that were divided up into state regiments, both sides. So you would have a regiment, you have the 54th Massachusetts or the 20th Maine, or whatever I can't remember the name of the regiment in the Minnesota that saved the day on the second day. They were something like, I don't know, I want to say there's 700-800 guys in this regiment, and the entire Confederate line was advancing, and they needed 5 minutes to shore up the line. And it might have been Hancock who said to the commander of this Minnesota regiment, "You see that Confederate flag over there that's in front of 5,000, 6,000, 8,000 people marching our way? Yes, sir. Go take that flag." So, I don't know, 700-800 Minnesotans went in, and 200-300 came out, and that's how you make a nation. When you've got guys from Illinois and Pennsylvania and Ohio digging frantically to put up a defensive wall, watching these guys from Tennessee and Alabama coming your way, and then guys from Minnesota go out there and save your life, now all of a sudden you're a country. And likewise, when you fought an enemy as dedicated and courageous and mostly honorable, but certainly more courageous in most cases than the Unions. The Confederate soldiers who put up with these kind of hardships, they're barefoot. Half of them don't have any food to eat. They said they look like starving wolves when they would come through a town. And these guys are kicking your butt for 4 years. You gain respect for even the enemy there. So this Civil War experience turned us into a nation. And that has not happened in Europe, and it's not going to happen now, because I think this Brexit is going to succeed. And by the way, if it does succeed, the French have said if the British leave, there will be a Frexit going to happen right away, because if the British leave, it's over. You may remember a year ago or so when they were having Greek riots and they wanted austerity and all the rest of it, and the Greeks wouldn't do it. And they had basically blackmailed the EU and said, no, we owe you the money. We don't deny that we owe you the money, but we're not going to pay you back. And furthermore, not only are we not going to pay you back, we want you to give us more money. Germany and these other powerful nations acceded to those demands. Why? Because they understood if somebody left the European Union, it's the end of the European Union. Greece, which was probably if not the least, not the smallest economic contributor, certainly in the bottom 5, I would think, they wouldn't let Greece go. If Britain leaves, which I want to say is probably the second biggest economy after Germany, it might be behind France, but I don't think it is. I think it's probably Germany, Britain, or France in that order. If Britain goes, if you lose your number 2 person on that team, it's not a team anymore. If Britain goes, then France goes. It just didn't work. And what killed it, Jonathan, was this attitude towards immigration. That's what killed the European Union. If, in fact, the Brexit happens, and if it doesn't, it's just a matter of time. It's going to happen. You cannot have these English people having no say. They have no say. The EU is not only a common market, but the EU laws, the laws of the country, the laws of the Union said that you must take people who are refugees from other EU countries or from whoever we decide to let in. If we decide, as the European Union, to let 50 million people into the country as refugees, you have to put them up. You just have to. If you don't like it, too bad. Well, they don't like it, so we're going to see. I think that the Brexit's going to happen. I think rather dramatically, too, would be my guess. So Europe Europe is not a country because Germans never had to stand there and watch Greek troops go in and die for them. That's why it's not a country, because the Germans never watched Greek soldiers go and die to protect German soldiers or British soldiers or whatever. And that's not a nation. That's a association. It's a club, but it's not a body. And the German people have, because the economies are different, there's a lot of resentment. Everybody knows that Greece's social benefits were paid by Germans. The Germans worked so hard and put so much money into the EU that they would give to Greece. I'm just using Greece as an example. And Greece would squander it on whatever, and then the Germans had to work harder to pay off the debt. Well, put aside the fact that they never fought and died for each other, if it turned out that the state of Tennessee spent huge amounts of money, didn't contribute anything to taxes, and when we said, hey, you guys got to square up the budget, Tennessee said, no, we're going to take as much money as the federal government, from the federal government as we want. We're not going to put anything back in. We're just going to squander it and waste it on ourselves. We're going to hang out at the beach. People would start having an attitude towards Tennesseans. And so there's that. In the United States, we don't have, states contribute different amounts of money, obviously, to the budget based on their populations and productivity and all the rest of it. But no one state, you can't say that the people of California are working in order for the people of Alabama to sit on their butts in the seaside. And that's exactly what's happening in Europe. Wouldn't be tolerated here, because we have one economic currency. They have the euro, obviously, but we have one culture. We have people in America. We move around so much that more or less we work as hard as Americans do, and we don't see a huge difference, I don't think, in the productivity of people from Oregon versus the productivity of people from Georgia. So can we U.S. exit from the UN, says Blakemore 14? We can, Blakemore, but the UN, what is the UN? The UN's a joke. The UN has been a joke since its inception. There were 10 years where they thought it might work. It's been a joke for 30 years, and it's simply, I don't even know what to call it anymore. The UN is like it's like a Broadway show. It's like an attraction of New York. It's kind of like, here you go. Let's just pretend. The UN has no power over us. Not really. They have power over Obama only because Obama and the progressives agree with him on so many things. They have no actual coercive power, and they never will. So there you go.